I worked in a smarmy nightclub, dance club, whatever kind of club you might want to call it, back in the mid to late 90s in Chicago. Actually, I didn't just work there. I started as a bar back. I'm 30 years old and hauling tubs of ice from the basement for the bartenders. They don't promote me to bartender. I quit after about a year. The owner calls me up out of the blue saying, "Hey, I need some help there. I remember you. You seem to work hard, mind your own business." Little did he know. So he brings me back. "I'll make you a bartender and I'll also make you an assistant manager. How's that?" So I said, "Okay." I came back, bartender, assistant manager. I became the manager. Then I managed one of his nightclubs, then another nightclub, and hilarity ensued. Anyway, I've written about this, I've blogged about it. I have a novella on Medium where I talk about that period of my life through a Romana Clay kind of style, Henry Miller-ish. I really like it, and when I get around to it, I want to write part 2 of that. The novella takes place during the week. It ends right before I go back into the bar for the weekend shift. And I was seeing the second part of the novella as being that shift to kind of bookend it. But I see tons of potential with this novel, and I might even turn it into a murder mystery, which is a screenplay I wrote at the time. And I am about 2 minutes into this podcast and already digressing, but to suffice to say, there is a trajectory here, folks. I am heading in a discernible direction, and that is, back in these 90 bar days, a wretched hive of scum and villainy, as Obi-Wan Kenobi referred to the Mos Eisley space station in the first Star Wars. The place was amazing, over the top in terms of personalities, in terms of reprehensible human behavior. Wow. And I remember at one point, I just looked around and it just spontaneously erupted as kind of an homage to The Wizard of Oz. I said, "Liars and cowards and thieves." Oh my, too much applause. Truer words never spoken. And yes, I bring this up now as a way of describing our cultural and political landscape. Hello and welcome to the Bald and Bloviating podcast. I'm your bald and bloviating host, Mookie Spitz. And that's exactly what I want to bloviate about today. Liars and cowards and thieves. Oh my. I just ran it on TikTok. One of those spontaneous grab the phone in my kitchen. The glimmer of an idea pops into my big bald head. And honestly, 9 times out of 10 on that single take, I'll caption it and post it. And this is one of those single take, spontaneous eruptions of bloviation. And the kernel of a thought that entered my brain was this. I get mean comments on social media, and it's evident that people aren't watching the whole video or reel. They're not really listening to what I'm saying, and they're just being triggered by a word, a phrase, a manner, and they just go for it. And this kind of reactive whiplash is emblematic of a couple things. One, that people believe what the party line is toting. The lingua franca of their own tribe is self-evident. So it's an input-output kind of stimuli-response Pavlovian reaction. There's no thinking here. You just say Joe Biden and you'll get a reaction. And it's a predictable reaction too, because if you look at these comments, not just on my own stuff, but across social media, and you do an AI analysis, and I'm sure professional firms do this as far as market research and the like, you'll obviously find patterns, and the patterns belie a lack of critical thinking and nuance. People just react to words, phrases, mannerisms, and boom, Joe Biden. Well, if you're a liberal, you felt that he gave it his best shot, and if you're not, then he was a walking zombie, which, by the way, at least to our senses, was true, who did his best for the liberals, but was a disgrace to the country and basically was just kind of a little pause before the inevitable ascent of Trump 2.0. So anyway, you look at this, it's a reaction to a reaction of a reaction. But there's two ways of looking at this too, which is, do people actually believe what they say is true, or is it more tongue-in-cheek? They know that the party line, the tribal lingua franca, is actually false, that they're lying. And they're picking up the lies because they know that it ostensibly benefits their party or their tribe. And for years, I've been trying to figure out, even with my friends, my family, my colleagues, where people sit on this spectrum between delusion, like Joe Biden is actually fit to be president physically and cognitively. That's delusional. But it was held as an a priori truth by many Democrats, especially establishment Democrats. But those same establishment Democrats who could see, who were with him, that the man was infirm, they kept toting that line because he's president. What are you going to do? And then with the audaciousness that he would run again, you go for that too. Against the rules of nature and physics and biology. So are people delusional or are they liars? That was my rant. And that got me thinking, and it precipitated the need for this pulling up the chair and rolling over the microphone podcast on the subject. And then I thought of my bar experience with that phrase, liars and cowards and thieves. Oh my. So I have people are delusional and liars. So I've got liars and cowards there. Because if you're really believing something like Joe Biden is fit to be president, just as you might be MAGA right now believing that Brendan Carr of the FCC didn't jawbone the studios to get Jimmy Kimmel off the airwaves, and then you're a coward. So you're a liar, you're a coward, and what the third category amounts to is, in a sense, the rationale for both, which is you're a thief. You're trying to steal America. And by that I mean is you don't give a shit about the other side. You think they're wrong. And I have a lot of liberal friends, predominantly liberal friends, because I lived in Manhattan. And I'm in marketing and advertising, and I'm a writer and a blogger. So I'm a creative guy. I go to the theater. So that makes me a libtard, at least culturally. And it's more or less true in terms of the demographics, where I grew up, a highly diverse North Chicago suburb there. And my background, the people I know, libtard. So I know it from the liberal side. And as I'm going to investigate in this rant, you've got liars and cowards and thieves on both sides. And they exhibit the same kind of MO. So again, whether or not Joe Biden was a zombie or a superhero depends on whether you're a liar, you're a coward, or a thief, and which affiliation you hang your hat on. And this thief component is significant, I think, in the sense of stealing what's not yours. This country is not owned by a party or an ideology, at least in its foundation. The whole point of the tripartite system, the checks and balances, limiting power, sharing power, forcing negotiation and compromise, obviously led to more inefficiency and bureaucracy than the founders ever really envisioned. And no, technology hasn't helped, at least not yet. It's actually made it probably worse. All this coupled with all the special interest groups. I mean, you look at the US tax code. To me, that is the most visceral and literal representation of governmental chaos. The code is what, like 1,800 pages long? It should be a single executive summary with a percentage that you pay based on your income, done. But it's the opposite of that. So we're grappling with special interests on the one hand. We're grappling with this binary system of Republicans and Democrats left, right on the other. We've had one revolution and schism after another. It's oscillated radically between extremes. It's been fueled by social media, the opportunity for everyone to bloviate. I don't think, as a side note, that people are any more or less racist or biased or ideological or extremist than they have been in the past. This might be a contentious position. I just think that everyone's got the megaphone now. And yes, there has been amplification and content acceleration thanks to social media. But I think people started out shitty. Liars and cowards and thieves on both sides. And now they're just shittier. They're bigger liars, they're bigger cowards, and they're bigger thieves. So I think it's really just a matter of quantity, not quality. And that could be its own separate argument. But what I'm getting at here is trying to draw distinctions and trying to really understand what motivates people. And back to the core rant of me in my kitchen on video a few minutes ago and me in front of the mic now is I'm always trying to figure it out. Like, I'm hearing somebody say things, and a big chunk, if not all of what they say, is so patently emotional and largely, if not entirely, untrue. And they say it with such passion and conviction, and it's reinforced by a laundry list of reasons to believe that are ostensibly cognitive. Like, here's something that happened, and here's why, and here's a what about the other party, and then occasionally an ad hominem attack or a slander, and occasionally an implicit little jab at either a race or an affiliation or a group or a kind of culture. And that's our discourse. But at the heart of it, are they a liar? Are they a coward? And chances are they're all thieves because they want to own the whole show. No compromise, no negotiation, no settling for anything but the whole pie. And Trump, who's never settled for anything except a whole pie his entire life, much to his detriment. Remember, his father apparently bequeathed him almost $500 million that he burned through. And there were critical moments where he not only overtly went bankrupt, I think a couple times, but when the whole house of cards was really looking like it was going to collapse. But the mofo always brought it back, probably because he's always been faking it, and he's always been muscling people with this mafioso-style bravado and attitude and operational methodology. So he's had his ups and downs, and clearly politics since 2015 has been his comeuppance. His comeuppance in terms of knocking it out of the park, but also in terms of applying all of these ostensibly shady methods to gain more and more and more power, and do so by bucking the system. We've realized that etiquette and protocol has been so central to the American gubernatorial ecosystem. We took it for granted. Like when the NSA told Obama that he can't have his cherished BlackBerry, and he had to fight for the permission from the security establishment to retain his BlackBerry, but he couldn't openly access the internet, and he could only email Axelrod and maybe a couple other people and his family. They gave him permission to use his restricted BlackBerry. And Trump is known for his Better Call Saul drawer full of like 18 burner phones, all of which are being monitored in real time by the security establishment of Russia, China, India, and whomever. I mean, I'm not making this shit up. This is known. And the Trump talent is now nobody gives a shit just because the needle has been moved so far. Simply because even if the shit that he does is illegal or unconstitutional, it takes time. Someone's going to have to sue him. A judge is going to have to react. And he's been busy padding the courts as well. So, okay, we know all of this. And that's our boy Trump. Is he a liar, a coward, and a thief? I guess so, but you could also look at him as a freedom fighter for the expanding power of the unitary executive. He is the destroyer of the woke mind virus, and he is making government ostensibly more corrupt and overextended, but he does seem to be getting shit done. Biden, going back to his zombie self, was essentially invisible. The guy didn't even do interviews. And Trump is all over the news 24/7, 365. And even and especially if you hate the guy and you think he's wrecking the country, you got to admit that he is a dynamo of attention-getting bravado, as he would say, braggadocio. Okay, here we are. But that's not really what I'm trying to get at. This is backdrop. I've painted like the scene. The foreground consists of the liar, the coward, and the thief. And going back to the liar, when you listen to pundits or you see comments on social media or influencers on social media, when you read ostensibly an institutional article or piece of air quote authoritative content, you really have to ask, is this person a liar or a coward? Is this person leaning into the propaganda of their tribe, of their party, of their side, of their ideology, not necessarily believing what they say and oftentimes deliberately lying just to benefit the cause of what they're trying to represent? And now lying can run deep. As I was mentioning before, the passions rule over the mind. The heart wins over the brain. And lots of times people are lying without even being aware of it. They're so bought in, and their implicit biases are so explicit that they're just going for it. But they're still lying. Deep down, and maybe up front, they know that what they're saying is mostly bullshit. But they say it anyway, and usually in direct proportion to the extent to which it is a lie. That's their level of enthusiasm. The more enthusiastic and bombastic their bloviation, the more they're lying, and the more they might even be aware that they're lying, and it's all for a cause. So if you're MAGA, you got to get rid of the liberals and the DEI and the woke stuff, and you got to make America great again. And they have some points. The border was open. Crime is bad. And basically, America could be realizing much more of its potential. But the question is how to do it. And the question is who's causing the problem and why. But they've got all the answers and they are going for it. So the ends justify the means. They will lie. They don't care. So Brendan Carr did not jawbone the studio and dangle the FCC licensing process. Jimmy Kimmel was taken off the air because he's not funny, because he doesn't have the ratings. That's why. And then you could peel away another layer of the onion and say, well, the FCC didn't do an action. They're just talking. But then you've got the looming mergers and deals that are going on as far as the media conglomerates go. And that begs the question of why all these M&As are happening, because then competition is reduced further. And you've already got a media oligopoly, right? An oligopoly of the media that, to the point of MAGA, is predominantly liberal, at least as far as the broadcast airways go, which is demonstrably correct. Go through the list. You've got Colbert, he got axed, right? You got Kimmel, he just got axed. You got Fallon, who's more of like this super talented clown than he is a biting political satirist. But he's probably got to go too. You got Seth Meyers, who's completely visceral. You've got John Oliver. Well, is he even an American citizen? I'm sure they're looking into it. Then you got Jon Stewart, the goat of goats of late night comedic, satirical, politicizing, political satire. And he's on the list. They're all on the list. And it seems to me, and anyone with half a brain cell, that they're going through the list. But a liar will say that the evidence of our own senses are deceiving us. That Jimmy Kimmel being yanked has nothing to do with any kind of agenda. And people, air quote, believe this. So the liars are lying, and the cowards are believing it. And I get tons of comments on social media, and I could tell you that you could feel it in their writing. They're not bots, they're real people. And you could feel it, that they really believe the shit that they write, which is, again, just raw propaganda. And I'm not picking just on MAGA. It's the same rules apply on the left. Liars and cowards. And the point I'm making is we're all thieves. Liars and cowards and thieves of American society, where conversation has been lost. Look at the assassination of Charlie last week. This week, he's not even buried yet, the poor guy. And I've ranted about him too, how he represented, whether you love him or hate him, debate. He stood there in front of a bunch of people with a microphone. No AI, no Photoshop. No one in his ear broadcast news style giving him facts about Sudan. He was out there and he was debating people. Did he say stuff that triggered the hell out of the left? Yes. But trust me on this, unless you're incendiary, nobody cares. That is the paradox and the tragedy of social media, that if you are nuanced and if you're two-sided, like your humble podcaster here, and you always both sides ism it, then you're not going to really grow a following. And if you grow a following, it's going to be slow. And you're just not sticky. People don't care because you're a lot less entertaining. You're too smart. You're a smart ass. And it behooves their own emotional sense that they belong to a tribe. And anytime you two sides them, they're going to have a visceral reaction. They don't like it because you're like bisexual. Try being a bisexual at a party. I haven't thought about it that way, but that's true too, right? Whenever you hear anyone say they're bisexual, if they're a man, then all of a sudden gay people are like, get out of here, you're really gay. And then straight people are like, this guy likes the penis. And if a woman says that they're bisexual because of our patriarchal society, right, the way our roles are laid out, if a woman says she's bisexual, then, the women might be a little enticed or leery. And the guys are like, ooh, wow, that's exciting. Can I watch? But you're still not you're not particularly welcome. You make people uncomfortable. People either want to watch or they want you the hell out of there. Oh, nuance. Critical thinking. No, we don't want that. We want you to be our tribal warrior representing the cause. Every single thing that you say and do, we completely agree with and support and rally around. Or you're the enemy, where there's this looking glass antimatter version of you, where every single thing you say is false and abhorrent, and you're destroying the country, and you must be silenced. This is deeply emotional. This is social Darwinian. This is how we survived in little tribes of hominids, anywhere from 30 people to max 100 for 1,000,000 years. And then you have genetic drift, which infuses us with xenophobia. It might even program genocide into our brains, where you need human tribes who are separate enough to maintain genetic diversity so that a single virus or contagion doesn't extinguish the entire species. But you still can't keep these human clans too isolated, because then you get genetic inbreeding, too much homogeneity, and then you get kids with 3 arms, and you create the opposite of diversity, which is this deficiency in morphology and behavior and cognitive ability. So we've been teeter-tottering on the brink between the forces that have programmed us to hate people different than us, to keep the tribes separate. And this also had logistical needs too, because if the tribes got too big and glommed onto each other, the resources weren't there to support it. We'd pollute our own watering hole. And at the same time, we had to find people in the other tribes sexy enough to sneak over and bang them so that the genes would mix a little bit. And we've been doing that balance, that genetic drift balancing act forever, to the point where it's programmed into us. And the expression of that is what? Liars and cowards and thieves. Oh my, in our politics. So ask yourself, when you bloviate, are you a liar, a coward, or a thief? Are you saying what you think you should be saying just to advance the cause of your party? Are you a coward in that you know what the truth seems to be without really doing so that the evidence of your senses are just not even listened to? You're just nodding along to the point where you actually believe the bullshit. And are you also a thief in that deep down you really, really think the other side is just completely wrong? And if you're a liberal, you look at MAGA and they're a bunch of racist, stupid assholes. And if you're MAGA and you look at the liberals, you think they're a bunch of snowflake, woke, deluded morons. And that is America in 2025. Lastly, look at Charlie, who got wasted in front of everybody only a few days ago, precipitating Jimmy getting yanked, further empowering Trump's agenda. Speaking of which, let's talk about the man behind the curtain of Oz for a second. If our heroes are terrified of liars and cowards and thieves, oh my, then the sense of shock, surprise, and disillusionment they encounter upon meeting the great Oz himself should be lessened by the simple fact that Jimmy Kimmel's suspension, if you will, and at this point, I highly doubt he'll be coming back. He refuses to apologize. He refuses to give to the Turning Point charity in honor of Charlie to atone for his mistake. In lieu of Sinclair Broadcasting, the network, the air quote flyover country, who is summarily demanding that he be now removed. What's going on behind the curtain is much more significant. And I've been both side-isming for the last half hour or so. But where I would like to shift the conversation is talking about the here and now in a way that just seems patently obvious to me. Trump has an agenda, and the agenda is to get rid of the liberal-dominated late-night programming roster. He said it himself. Colbert, Kimmel, Fallon, Seth Meyers, etc. Brandon Carr, FCC, is on board. Now, the studios, these media conglomerates, are playing ball because they're being pragmatic. They have to. The FCC license is twofold. It's not only authorizing a major M&A between Nexstar and its other affiliate to go from 39% reach of the American population to 80% after this M&A. So it's not just authorizing the M&A itself, but apparently there's a clause in the FCC's mandate that no single organization can go beyond, 40% ownership, 40% reach of the American population. This was set in place for obvious reason that a single media empire dominating the airwaves will dominate the conversation. You want to keep it diverse. You want to keep it open. And from a business point of view, we want to keep it competitive. So from an ideological point of view, this is how someone seeking more power, unabashed, shameless power, goes about doing it. You win the hearts and minds, and it's the authoritarian playbook. I know it's a cliche, and it's the essence of Trump derangement syndrome, TDS, as the right likes to call it now, the MAGA minions call it. But call it what you want. If you control the programming of a majority of the country, then you control the country. This White House has been shameless and unabashed in its intent to do that. And if they are dictating what can and can't be said by late night comics, they can similarly start dictating what can and can't be said by the news, the air quote authoritative news channels. Now, it's been shown that the evolution, if you will, of digital, the fragmentation that's resulted from all of these channels and all of this content has splintered the conversation. Back in the days, in contrast, of broadcast media where you had only a few channels on your TV and they pumped those in and there was no on-demand content, then a TV show could be highly influential, like MASH or like Will and Grace. Remember Will and Grace? Will and Grace did more for gay rights than anything before it. Will was a straight looking, straight acting gay dude. He was a professional. And aside from intimating in the show that this guy dated men, he was really just a regular guy. And at the time, a lot of gay rights groups were upset by this, which is this was a milquetoast, homogenized homosexual. And in a sense, he was camouflaged behind the normality of the role. But that was intentional, and it was great for two reasons. One, it enabled the role to happen. I mean, think about an air quote openly gay guy on network TV. Woo! That's almost as crazy as thinking a guy with the name Barack Hussein Obama can be president. But I digress. So Will was gay, but he was palatable. It's like bringing black people into white culture slowly and through entertainment and the arts. The Al Jolsons of the world, the Sammy Davis Juniors of the world. These were black entertainers whom white audiences came to know and like. And through that, the wall was shattered, or at least knocked over, or at least entered, at least knocked on, to the point where, yeah, black people can be okay. I mean, look, this guy's really funny. This guy's a great dancer. This guy is a great actor. And Will was that kind of threshold, renormalized, genre busting, convention busting, culture busting gay icon. Whether the gay community found him too generic or not. And the point of my harangue here is that Will and Grace did this for gay rights because there were only a handful of TV shows and literally 50 million people saw them. It wasn't like you could just go to YouTube and hang out, go down the doom scroll button. But Will and Grace was on TV. What's on TV? Let's watch. There was Will and Grace. And then there was this like normal gay dude. He might have liked dick. Might have done other despicable things, which are actually illegal still in my state. But look, he's a normal guy and he's actually kind of funny. And maybe gay people aren't the demons that they tell me they are in church. So, okay. So, I'm going to flip it around now. If you control 80% of the households, and if the content is, in a sense, influenced, if not dictated, by the White House, then you have that similar kind of control. Only instead of making gay people palatable to America, mainstream America, you all of a sudden start creating this looking glass universe, this Oz, if you will, of America, American history, and exactly what the hell is going on. Conspiracy theorists abound. Now, I'm not saying that this is not already happening. That's the point. That's the excuse that's used by the Project 2025 people on the right. That's the excuse used by Trump himself, which is that there's been bias and we're just counteracting the bias. And to a certain extent, they're right. The late night talk shows and comedy shows have been mostly liberal, duh. So this is the counterforce. This is an equalization. This is bringing equilibrium to programming in America. But where it's qualitatively and soon quantitatively different is that the man behind the curtain of Oz isn't just blowing smoke up the ass of the flying monkeys who are close enough to the throne room. but is broadcasting the bullshit out to all of Oz and doing in a manner which is just so overtly obvious and literally programmed and intentional with ostensibly independent bodies like the FCC at their whim and doing it openly and shamelessly and with gusto. That's the difference. So this is possible, and it's fueled by a willing and able population of, drum roll please, liars and cowards and thieves. So you got the man behind the curtain now with even more power and influence with all the bells and whistles and gizmos, blasting it out to all of Oz. And you've got millions of liars and cowards and thieves who can't get enough of it. And that's the problem. So we had issues with Joe Biden, zombie president, shambling around the White House when he wasn't taking a nap. And now we've got Trump, who's pretty soon almost as old, but by any stretch of the imagination, still going for it, flipping it. And again, I understand that the Biden White House pressured Facebook to remove posts that were alleging that the COVID virus originated in a laboratory in Wuhan. Whoa. And now the scientific establishment is pretty much, that's probably what happened. And yes, there were adverse events from the vaccines that were downplayed. And we're paying for that too with the whiplash at the NIH. So yes, they're liars and cowards and thieves on both sides of the political aisle. But we're having this oscillation and whiplash effect, which is exponentially accelerated by our technology on the one hand, but by a president who's more Nixon than Nixon. In another rant, I was saying Nixon isn't spinning in his grave. He's like, wow, he's trying to high five the Donald from the other side, like Obi-Wan. Remember in Star Wars, he comes back first as a disembodied voice and then this kind of shimmering ghost-like entity to talk to Luke. You got Nixon sitting next to Donald at the Resolute desk, patting the guy on the back. Why didn't I think of that? Nixon resigned. I did another rant about that. Why did he resign? He felt that the Republicans wouldn't back him up. Well, if it came down to brass tacks, would the Republicans have really impeached him? That's one question. And the other is, no one put a gun to his head to resign. He didn't legally have to do anything. And if he broke the law, well, you can't really prosecute a president who's holding office. Now, can you? That's why there's impeachment. And the cat bites its own tail. But my point is, Richard Milhouse Nixon is looking at Donald John Trump and going, oh my God, you've got balls, and I salute you, sir. That's the difference here. Biden was a zombie, and he overextended himself in a lot of ways, including free speech. But that was nothing in comparison to the ghost of Richard Nixon grabbing the Adderall bottle, chugging it down, and going for it. It's not only the man behind the curtain. This isn't just Oz. But this is like some Battlestar Galactica shit. This is science fiction. This is the Emperor. Bring it on down. And again, the minions are in support of this. The liars and cowards and thieves that are most of us are eating this shit up. So what are we going to do about it? I don't know. I don't think there's anything we can do about it. I am going to rant pretty soon because I don't think it's completely hell's bells yet. There's a Pollyanna side to me, which is like, we've got 3 more years of this and it's going to be coming in full steam. But here's how we're different. I'm going to give a little hint, and this is kind of just really pumping myself up to get my own thoughts together. But we're not like Russia. We're not like the tribal authoritarian states of the Middle East. Our pedigree in the United States is one of the tripartite system of freedom. And obviously, it hasn't really worked exactly. All men are created equal. Well, what about women? Well, what about black people and minorities? What about gay people? We got to the trans part, and now that plug is pulled figuratively and literally. So we've had our mistakes and we've had our moments. I don't know. Go look it up. Indiana had a governor who was a KKK party. There's the KKK party, and the governor of Indiana was KKK. All right, I just pulled that, random tidbit out of my Howard Zinn history of the U.S. But we've had our excess. Look at Huey Long. Huey, the ghost of Huey Long is sitting there with Richard Nixon and Donald at the one side. Trump is sitting there right now with the ghost of Nixon on one side and the ghost of Huey Long on the other. How's that for a visual? That's pretty cool. I'm getting somewhere with this. It's only taken me 45 minutes, but my point though is that there's nothing new here. And we're just going through the motions, and there's an enormous swath of the country which is like right on. And then the other swath of the country, which is busy outrage, they've been probably just as bad with their own excesses, liars and cowards and thieves, all of us, oh my. But here's where I'm a little Pollyanna, as I'm saying, and I can't wait to rant about this, is we're not a Russia. We're used to things being the brand of the United States is free speech. The brand of the United States is checks and balances. And the brand of the United States is this kind of zeitgeist of zany, chaotic, bureaucratic, democratic inefficiency, constant conflict. The melting pot is a roiling, boiling cauldron of awfulness. Writers have been writing about this. William S. Burroughs, the evil that's built into this very country. I mean, we decimated and annihilated whole tribes of people to steal their land, just like everyone did at some point. And that's not getting us off the hook or blaming the victim. I'm just saying the history of this country is rooted in genocide and sweeping people away. But at the heart of America is this irreverence, is this don't tread on me. And it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But I think it's going to get better. Eventually, it'll whiplash the other way. And then we might even miss the good old days of Huey Long, Richard Nixon, and Donald, all fist pumping. Liars and cowards and thieves indeed. Oh my. Anyway, never a dull moment. Thank you for listening. More to come. And I can't even keep up with it. I am just so thrilled to be alive and to have a microphone and to rant into the void in a time like this. I remember Obama's beige suit controversy. I mean, there was shit going on all over the universe. Look at the crisis in Sudan. Who the fuck is talking about the crisis in Sudan right now? You've got a city under siege with 250,000 people who are starving to death and being brutalized. No one cares. No one's talking about this. Goes back to Noam Chomsky talking about East Timor, right? No one gives a shit. We've got this bias. We're talking about Jimmy Kimmel. There's still food in the supermarket. We're living better than ever, and yet we feel it's the end of the world as we know it. That, my friends, is the human condition. And I got to stop before I exhaust even myself.